it was black. I couldn't see him.
Overnight, just like that, one of the most carefully constructed victim narratives in Hollywood history collapsed live, on camera, in front of millions. Amber Heard walked into that courtroom with everything: the sympathy, the franchise, the culture, and she walked out with nothing but memes and a one-way ticket to Madrid. So how did it all go so catastrophically, spectacularly wrong? Subscribe and stay with me for the full meltdown.
Now, I guess we'll talk about the movie, I guess, here.
Oh, well, I guess that's what I'm doing today, so.
It was a lot of fun.
I saw it actually last night for the first time.
Really? Were you at the screening last night? Okay, cool.
It was hilarious. I laughed. I laughed from start to finish.
Yeah, it needed more of you. That was my only thing.
I think so, too.
Let's set the scene. Austin, Texas, 1986. A girl is born who will one day defecate on a famous man's bed out of spite and somehow expect the world to take her side. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Amber Laura Heard had, by all accounts, a completely unremarkable childhood. Normal family, normal town, beauty pageants on weekends, which she would later describe as exploitative and degrading, conveniently forgetting that she competed in them willingly as a teenager. But sure, feminism, whatever. At 18, she did what every ambitious, conventionally attractive young woman with Hollywood dreams does. She packed her bags, pointed herself toward California, and prayed that talent was optional. Spoiler alert, it mostly was. The early years were rough in that very specific Hollywood struggling actress way. Bit parts, forgettable TV appearances, the kind of roles that exist purely to fill runtime. But in 2006, she landed her first genuine lead in All the Boys Love Mandy Lane, a slasher film that wouldn't even get a proper release for years, but caused enough of a stir on the festival circuit to put her name on a few radars. Then came 2008, Pineapple Express, Never Back Down. Suddenly, Amber Heard was a name people were saying out loud without immediately forgetting it. She was attractive, she was present on screen, and she was just talented enough to not be immediately removed from a scene. In Hollywood terms, that's practically a golden ticket. But here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting we mean deeply telling. Around this same time, Amber came out as gay, or bisexual, or something in between. She was famously vague about it, offering the profoundly unhelpful declaration that she didn't label herself one way or the other. Groundbreaking stuff. She began dating photographer Tasha Van Ree, and for a while, things seemed fine, until they very much weren't. Because in what would become an almost poetic preview of things to come, Amber was arrested at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport for allegedly assaulting Van Ree. Her response? The arresting officer was homophobic. The arresting officer was a lesbian. The charges were dropped. The incident was buried, and Amber Heard walked away without consequence, a pattern that, as we will see, she would come to rely on with alarming confidence. She was still a B-lister, still scraping for roles, still one audition away from being someone's answer to a pub quiz question nobody gets right. What she needed wasn't talent or timing or hard work. What she needed was a famous husband. Enter Captain Jack Sparrow. Johnny Depp in 2009 was not just a movie star, he was the movie star. Pirates of the Caribbean had made him a global phenomenon. He was quirky, beloved, critically respected, and had the kind of cultural goodwill that takes decades to build. He was, in short, exactly the kind of person whose orbit could completely transform a struggling actress's career trajectory. The two met on the set of The Rum Diary in 2009. He was 46, she was 23, and whatever was happening between them, it was not subtle. By 2015, they were married, and wouldn't you know it, the moment that ring went on Amber's finger, her career suddenly caught fire. Justice League, Aquaman, magazine covers, brand deals, red carpet appearances at Cannes. She was everywhere, draped in couture, on the arm of one of the most recognizable men on the planet, and the industry was opening doors for her that talent alone never would have unlocked. She had successfully converted proximity to fame into the appearance of fame. It was, in its own horrifying way, a masterclass. But behind closed doors, complete chaos. The marriage was, depending on who you believe, either a war zone of mutual dysfunction or a prolonged campaign of abuse against a helpless woman. In 2016, Amber filed for divorce and a restraining order, accusing Depp of physical and emotional abuse. The entertainment media, primed by the cultural moment of the era, rallied behind her immediately. No questions asked, no evidence required. Just vibes and solidarity and a very powerful PR machine. She received a $7 million divorce settlement. She pledged every cent of it to charity, to the Eclu and the Children's Hospital Los Angeles, because she wanted the world to know this was never about the money. Remember that. Tattoo it somewhere. You're going to need it. Depp, meanwhile, was quietly blacklisted, dropped from Fantastic Beasts, axed from Pirates. His career, built over 3 decades, was essentially set on fire while the industry looked the other way and called it progress. Amber Heard had not just won the divorce, she had won the narrative. And in Hollywood, narrative is everything. She had the sympathy, she had the settlement, she had the franchise, she had the momentum. All she had to do was stay quiet and enjoy it. She could not do that. December 2018, Amber Heard, a woman who had already won, legally, financially, and culturally, sat down and wrote an opinion piece for the Washington Post. In it, she described herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse, a woman being silenced, a brave voice being punished simply for speaking out. She did not name Johnny Depp directly. She didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly what she was doing. Now, let's pause here. Let's breathe. And let's ask the question that apparently nobody in Amber's inner circle was brave enough to ask her at the time. Why? You got the money. You got the career bump. You got the cultural moment. The man's career is in ruins. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here? What is the end game? What does victory look like to you? Because from the outside and from the inside, as we would eventually learn, this looked less like advocacy and more like overreach. Like someone who had gotten away with something enormous and, instead of walking away quietly, decided to go back and kick the hornet's nest one more time just to feel the rush. Johnny Depp had had enough. He sued her for defamation in the United Kingdom in 2019, a case he would lose, but which would begin to surface evidence that complicated Amber's spotless victim narrative considerably. Then came the main event, the American defamation trial, Virginia, 2022. 6 weeks, cameras in the courtroom, millions of viewers watching live on YouTube like it was a sporting event, because it absolutely was. Amber Heard had built her entire public identity on a single, carefully maintained story, and now that story was going to be tested, in public, under oath, against a legal team that had done their homework in the most watched celebrity trial since O.J. Simpson. She walked into that courtroom like she'd already won. She had not already won. She had, in fact, already lost. She just didn't know it yet. April 11th, 2022. The cameras switched on, the world tuned in, and Amber Heard, dressed impeccably, composed, and rehearsed, took her seat in a Fairfax County courtroom, ready to deliver the performance of her life. The problem, and this is crucial, is that life is not a performance. From the very first day, something was off. The testimonies felt staged. The tears arrived on cue and evaporated just as quickly. The emotional beats landed with the precision of a community theater production rather than the rawness of genuine trauma. Social media noticed immediately. Within hours, clips were circulating. Reaction videos were multiplying. TikTok was absolutely feasting. But the optics were just the appetizer. The main course was the evidence. Johnny Depp's legal team had spent years preparing for this moment, and they showed up with the kind of documentation that makes lawyers wake up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat. Audio recordings, text messages, photographs, witness testimony, and perhaps most devastatingly, Amber's own words, captured on tape, played back in a courtroom in front of the entire planet. In one recording, Amber could be heard openly mocking Depp for trying to retreat from conflict, telling him to go tell people that he was a victim of domestic abuse and see if anyone believed him. She laughed. In another clip, she acknowledged hitting him, but reframed it with the kind of logic that made the internet collectively put down their coffee cups. It wasn't a punch, she explained. It was a slap, as though the distinction somehow settled the matter. It did not settle the matter. Then came the charity donation bombshell. That's $7 million. The money she had announced to the world she was donating entirely, because this was never about the money. Except, as it turned out, she had donated approximately $1.3 million of it. The rest, kept. Every penny. When pressed about this under oath, her explanations shifted, crumbled, and collapsed like a badly constructed alibi in a crime thriller, which, coincidentally, is exactly what it was. And then there was the incident. The one that launched 1,000 memes. The one that no amount of legal strategy, sympathetic lighting, or carefully rehearsed testimony could ever explain away. Someone, and the evidence pointed with uncomfortable clarity toward Amber, had defecated in Johnny Depp's bed. His actual bed. As an act of what could only be described as the most unhinged revenge in the history of celebrity breakups. The housekeeper testified. The photographs were submitted as evidence. The internet, already at a rolling boil, absolutely erupted. In that single moment, The carefully constructed image of Amber Heard, brave advocate, dignified survivor, voice of a generation, did not crack. It detonated. Here is something that Amber Heard fundamentally miscalculated. She built her entire strategy around a media landscape that no longer existed. In 2016, when she first went public with her accusations, the cultural machinery worked in her favor. Believe women. No questions asked. The wave was enormous, and the momentum was real, and anyone who pushed back risked being buried under an avalanche of public condemnation. It was, for Amber's purposes, the perfect storm. But 2022 was a different world entirely. By 2022, people had watched enough public accusations unravel. They had seen enough contradictions go unexamined. They had developed, through years of Twitter arguments and viral callouts and dramatic public reversals, a finely tuned radar for performance. And what they were watching in that Virginia courtroom set that radar screaming. TikTok became a courtroom of its own. Body language experts dissected her testimony frame by frame. Former fans posted side-by-side comparisons of her emotional responses that were, to put it charitably, inconsistent. The hashtags were merciless. The memes were relentless. And unlike the traditional media, which was still, bafflingly attempting to maintain its pro-Amber narrative, the internet had absolutely no institutional loyalty to protect. Johnny Depp, meanwhile, was doing something remarkable. He was being himself, sketching in his notebook during recesses, cracking quiet jokes, waving at supporters outside the courthouse with the energy of a man who had decided that if he was going to be destroyed in public, he was at least going to be authentic about it. The contrast with Amber's performance was so stark, it needed no commentary. The public drew their own conclusions, loudly, constantly, and with extraordinary creativity. Fan gatherings formed outside the courthouse. Merchandise appeared. People were showing up with signs. Johnny Depp had transformed a defamation trial into something approaching a redemption rally, and he had done it almost entirely by accident, just by refusing to pretend. Amber's team tried everything. They pivoted the narrative. They questioned the mob mentality. They raised legitimate points about the dangers of trying a case on social media, points that, in a vacuum, had genuine merit. But the vacuum did not exist. The court of public opinion had convened, reviewed the evidence, and delivered a verdict long before the jury had even begun deliberating. And on June 1st, 2022, that jury agreed. Johnny Depp was awarded $10 million in compensatory damages and $5 million in punitive damages. Amber received a comparatively token $2 million on a counterclaim. The scoreboard was clear. The message was unambiguous. Amber Heard had walked into that courtroom as Hollywood's brave survivor. She walked out as its most spectacular cautionary tale. The day after the verdict, the calls stopped coming. Not gradually, not slowly, overnight. Like someone had flipped a switch in a building and every light went dark simultaneously. The Hollywood machine which had championed Amber platformed her, handed her franchise roles and magazine covers, and the cultural armor of righteous victimhood, suddenly discovered it had a very important meeting it needed to get to somewhere else. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was already in post-production. Her role was not recast. Recasting would have required acknowledgement. Instead, her scenes were simply trimmed, reduced, quietly excised until her presence in the film was so minimal it barely qualified as a cameo. She had co-starred in a billion-dollar movie. She was now essentially a background extra in its sequel. The symbolism was frankly almost too perfect. The Eclue, the organization she had pledged millions to and whose goodwill she had borrowed to construct her public image, quietly distanced itself. The brand deals evaporated. The magazine covers dried up. The red carpet invitations stopped arriving. People who had publicly defended her began developing a sudden, profound interest in saying nothing at all, because there is one thing Hollywood hates more than a scandal. It is a losing scandal. Amber Heard had not just lost a court case. She had become a liability, the entertainment industry's most radioactive property, a name that could not be attached to a project without triggering immediate public backlash. In an industry that runs on perception, she had become perception poison. She appealed the verdict. The appeal was rejected. And then, quietly, without fanfare, without a farewell tour or a redemption interview or even a strongly worded statement, Amber Heard left. She relocated to Madrid, Spain. Reports emerged of a new identity, a quieter life, a daughter she was raising largely out of the public eye. There were no new film roles announced. No streaming deals, no podcast, no memoir, at least not yet, though one assumes it is coming eventually, because it always does. The woman who had weaponized an entire cultural moment, who had bent the machinery of media and public sympathy to her will, who had watched a beloved movie star get dismantled by accusations she manufactured, was now living abroad in relative anonymity. Her career not merely paused, but permanently altered. And Johnny Depp, back on the red carpet, back at Cannes, back in conversations about Pirates of the Caribbean, rehabilitated, celebrated, and greeted by crowds who cheered like he'd returned from war, because in a sense, he had. The arc was almost poetic, almost Shakespearean. A powerful man brought low by accusations, who refused to disappear quietly, who fought back in public, and who, against every prediction, won. Amber Heard had every advantage: the timing, the culture, the sympathy, the settlement, and she burnt every single one of them to the ground with her own hands. Some crashes are tragic, some are avoided, and some, like this one, are so spectacularly, so completely self-inflicted that all you can do is watch the wreckage and marvel at the sheer scale of the miscalculation. The curtain has fallen. The performance is over.